ad hoc committee meeting. Or there should be any change?
So move, Mr. Chair.
So move. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, any discussion? All right. Madam Clerk, you take the vote.
I'm sorry, we're having a hard time with my muting and unmuting, so I apologize. I have a new computer, so.
That's all right.
Malinowski,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Overture Walker,
Yes.
Mackey,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is adoption of the agenda. Director Niemeyer, are there any changes or any additions or deletions?
No, Mr. Chair.
All right. Is there a motion?
Move for the
So move,
adoption
Mr.
of the agenda.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All right, Madam Clerk, you take the vote.
Sure. Malinowski,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Overture Walker,
Yes.
Mackey,
Yes.
motion passes.
All right, thank you. Next item on the agenda are items for information. We're going to begin with item 4A with the signage update. Director Niemeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Again, Michael Niermeyer, Transportation Director. At our last two meetings, there was some discussion about the signage that I had asked Public Information's, their graphics artist, to create for us. Subsequently, I had a discussion with Ms. Mackey about it. What you see on page 8 of 46 in your agenda, first being the original design that we'd come up with that was put on some of the smaller signs out on projects. And then based on the discussion, we have a slightly different design that highlights Richland County at the top, not necessarily the transportation, but then talks about that the project is funded by your penny. I'm not certain what more we would need or if there's any input that this body wants to suggest. One of the things I did look up after our discussion, Ms. Mackey, and I talked with Director Maloney and Director Devers, says they don't put any signage up on any of their projects. Utilities may put something up in a larger facility, but unless it's been directed, there's nothing that says this utility project was brought to you by Richland County or any of the public works projects. So that's where I sit with any kind of updated information. Definitely any suggestions or any other comments you would have, I'd be receptive.
Sure.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I see some hands up. I apologize.
It's okay. I see Councilwoman Mackey Blee had her hand up first. You recognize, Councilwoman.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Nehemiah is correct. We did have a conversation regarding some changes to the sign, and I appreciate you working with the PIO office to address some of those changes. I just want to point out too that I think the other thing you and I discussed is really looking at a better URL to get to the Penny Project website. I believe you and your team spent a good bit of time updating that information to make sure that it's current for projects, but we don't have a good URL or easy one that we can use on materials so that folks can get there quickly. And right now it's kind of lost on our website and hard for folks to find the information if they're just on the homepage. So that doesn't necessarily have to do with signage, but I still do encourage us to figure out a way to come up with a better URL to access that information.
Certainly, it's I remember we did talk about that, and I had inquired with IT to come up with some type of like a mini URL. I think it's one of the things you suggested, and perhaps putting that at the bottom. The other option would be once you get to that back to the Richland County webpage, having a more I guess visible button to get into transportation. So I'll continue to explore that with both IT for like the mini URL as well as the front page of the of the county's webpage.
Thank you.
All right, Councilwoman McBride, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think putting Richland County out front looks good. At least people know that the penny is at work. I think a problem that we're dealing with in our other departments of the county is people don't know it's the county. And we're doing a lot of good things, but we get I'll just say, for lack of a better term, we get community development or public works, but they don't know that's Richland County. So in terms of branding, I think that we need to start putting Richland County out front and the other names come underneath it. Because sometimes I'm wondering, I said, well, what department is that? Is that city or county? So I thank Ms. Mackey for her recommendation, and Mr. Nehemiah, thank you for working on it. So I think it's a good start.
Thank you, Councilwoman. All right, Mr. Livingston, you recognized.
Mr. Chair, my point's pretty much been made, so I'm good.
Okay. Councilwoman Teresa, you're recognized, and good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, and thank you. I'm driving just right now, so thank you for recognizing me. I was just gonna circle back to Ms. Mackey's request around the URL. Are we talking about like a customized bit.ly? Because I could see that something like that being put to use for lots of different things in the county if we were to make use of that kind of technology.
I wasn't necessarily referring to a bit.ly, more so a URL that, and you call it a vanity URL, basically, that would go back, link back to the current site, but something that's a little shorter, right? So whether it's richlandpenny.com or something else catchy that people know they can get to directly instead of what we have now, which is richlandcountysc.gov/transportation/penny project. Way too long.
Yes, I hear you for sure.
Ms. Mackey, you remember that? That is great.
You are good.
Yeah, I'm actually really impressed with that. Yeah, so bit.lys can be made like vanity URLs too. So yeah, I think we're on the same page there. So
Okay,
something
great.
similar, a short URL that's really memorable.
Yes.
And if I may just chime in as well, I agree with everything that has been said. And I think Director Nehemiah, the reason why, the signage issue with respect to these penny projects is, such a big deal, at least it's important to me and many others on county council, is because I can remember, just recently, campaigning throughout most of 2020. And, what came up a lot was, the penny. And people feeling like projects weren't happening, or maybe they didn't see any benefit to their community, not realizing that, okay, a roadway that was being widened at the time was in fact a penny project. Or you have someone who said, well, I just read in the newspaper, or there was a story that ran, a story I heard on the news about the penny. So the county, from a PR standpoint, really took a hit, I think, the last year as a result of some of the stories that came out about the penny program. And a lot of folk didn't realize all the good that was happening with this program, like all the projects that are taking place. Like I ran in District 8, and people were surprised to find out that the largest penny project to date was taking place on Hardscrabble Road. That was a revelation to them. And so what I kind of struggle with is, Councilwoman McBride just mentioned making sure Richland County is very prominent on the signage, but then at the same time, some people, I wonder what can we do to inform people that it is in fact a penny project. Some people may see Richland County, not realize it's a penny project, but they see maybe a large emblem of a penny, and they may put two and two together, but then they may not realize that it's Richland County, right? So I don't know, just sort of trying to figure out a way that we can sort of, get the best of both worlds with the signage, where people know it's Richland County, but at the same time, they know it's the penny. But that's just food for thought. That's a suggestion, but also to just inform your department about why this is so important, because elected officials like us, we're in the community and we are hearing, we hear things. from folk, and many of them don't know all the good that's happening with this program. So. All right, the next item on the agenda is 4B, which is the Gills Creek Greenway update. Mr. Nehemiah?
Thank you, Mr. Walker. As a follow-up again to the last meeting in March, I know I gave the appearance of leaving everybody hanging when we dropped the Gills Creek Greenway meeting, I guess, soundbite to everybody. Upon further reflection and discussion, having a meeting based on a reaction to a few residents was a bit premature. We're intending to hold off on the meeting until such a time as we have the remaining funding for Gills Creek Greenway assessed and an updated engineer's estimate created. And we have some numbers now, but what we're finding is as money from pre-FY18, meaning money that wasn't necessarily allocated against a specific project, is brought up through evaluation of the expenses. The number of the 5.37 million for that greenway is dwindling. So we're looking at, with our on-call engineering team, of taking that boardwalk and walkways from a 12-foot to something smaller, perhaps a 10 or 8. That would allow us to stretch it out, as well as have a less of an impact on those the wetlands along Gills Creek, which I know would make a lot of groups happy. So I don't want to be premature telling people what we're going to do when we don't know exactly what we can do. We have decent estimates for phase 2 and 3. It's just that final phase 4. So it would be irresponsible to really move forward with information that we're not completely certain of it. So we'll keep this body and others updated as we develop those numbers, get a little more clear, and have real final estimates on what we can do with the money that we have. Any questions on that?
Thank you, Mr. Nehemiah. Councilwoman Teresa, you are recognized.
Thank you so much. Yes, so when you mentioned, so I'm very supportive of not having a super wide pathway if it's not needed. How have discussions gone with the City of Columbia regarding that? And I apologize if I missed something because I was transitioning from car to home.
Sure. Yes, ma'am. We've had brief discussions on this matter when we talked about coordinating for the actual public meeting on it, and rolling in some of their the plans that the city had. We owe them a dollar number. Well, I don't owe them, but we said we would get them a dollar number or dollar figure of what we have remaining, previously spent, what we have encumbered for design, to know what we would have for construction. So they've been receptive to that point. They did grant what's called an administrative adjustment to their greenway standards previously, to reduce from 14 to 12. And we're looking at going back for a second administrative adjustment to get that approved, to potentially go from 12 to a 10 or 12 to an 8. Maybe even different segments along. I think the initial adjustment saved about 14% in construction material costs. I don't know what another drastic reduction would cause. I don't think it'd be a proportional number. Plus anticipate we have to update estimates with the new cost of lumber, which isn't going to help matters much with us trying to stretch that greenway out. So hopefully by the time we get the numbers finalized, we get at least a design for phase 4. Then we'll have enough factual information, have that discussion with the city, and then be able to have that public meeting and present to the area and then, the county and the city what the plan is for building Gills Creek Greenway.
Thank you for that. That is good news. So thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions? Well, moving on to the next item on the agenda. Item 5, these are items for action, beginning with item 5A. This is the City of Columbia Bikeway Intergovernmental Agreement. All right, Mr. Nehemiah, would you be willing to, explain to
Certainly.
Committee what this is all about?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Walker. I say item 5A found on pages 10 of your packet and following is the corrected City of Columbia Bikeway IGA. There was just some version control issues going back and forth between attorneys and the city and the county. And what put before you last week or back in on March 23rd was one of the versions that didn't have the final language in it. So what's presented today in attachment 1, although with red lines through it and the additions visible so you can pick them out, is the correct Bikeway IGA. There are some errors in it from, I called it the Adobe conversion, where we converted from one to the other and certain markups shifted. But in general, the big changes are on page 1, where we say the city shall construct, install the project. That is language that we worked into towards the rest of the IGA. We removed a big chunk of the paragraph from the city may propose revisions or additions down. Other large changes include section 3A miscellaneous provisions. We added in a time span for the project. That was a recommendation from the attorney. We talked about the Exhibit A. We talked about the reportability of the city, which was important for our compliance and making sure money is being spent properly. You can find that in section 3B towards the end. City shall provide quarterly detailed expenditure report. And finally, we Exhibit A, which there was no changes from the last March IGA. The numbers remain the same at the $824,322, which again, I reiterate, is within the FY21 budget. So requesting is just to reapprove or approve the correct version, and that version can go to council if this body deems it.
Any questions?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I do think this version, it does a good job of making sure we're very specific about what the city's going to do in terms of what they shall construct and shall install and so forth. I think that really makes it very clear.
It was important to not necessarily nail them down, but to ensure that what the money is being provided for is being done. It may, it may call for something, they're going to have to be able to design it and build it within the confines of those bikeways or bike corridors, if you will.
Okay. Any other questions?
Mr. Chair.
You recognize Councilman Malinowski.
Thank you, Chairman Walker. Question, Mr. Niemeyer, on in section 1, the very last sentence of the first paragraph. It says the project will comply with all applicable city codes and state and federal regulations. You think we should add in there also and penny tax spending regulations, so there's no doubt about it?
Sir, I believe we cover that in miscellaneous provisions, where we also talk about, where was that?
Maybe you did, but that's like separating it, I kind of think.
It is, sir.
And then since you mentioned it, when you go to miscellaneous provisions, which is section 3, the very first sentence says city's design, installation / construction, operation, and maintenance obligations shall commence upon receipt of funding and from the county. I think you mean from the county. And then it says, the next sentence says the city's maintenance obligations shall commence upon completion of the bike infrastructure. So you're saying two different things in two sentences, one after the other. One says maintenance obligations commence on receipt of the funding, and the other says it commences upon completion of the bike infrastructure. So which is it?
I see your point. I read that too, and it looked a little strange when I reviewed it.
Maybe you could just clarify that before we get the final copy.
Okay. Yes, sir.
At least for me, for
That
explaining.
was section 3A, sir?
Yes, sir, 3A. And also, and maybe this has to do with what you said on the changing of the programs to type this. Back on section 1, the second paragraph, where it says the city shall construct / install the project. The above, the right before the crossed out portion, it says deemed necessary to complete the project so long as such change orders, modifications, or alterations sole discretion.
That was all struck, sir.
Something, yeah, but
anything-
there's something, sole
That should be left
discretion,
out too.
that should be struck also?
Is there anything after the project was the city may propose revisions and additions to the project?
So
That's
after,
struck all the way. That's one of those.
Yeah.
is it
Adobe
after the word
error things.
alterations? It goes through alterations?
Yes, they're all the way down to project as a result of the revision or addition. So the final sentence would
Yeah,
be.
yeah, I see that. Okay, so that other part's out too. All right. And see if I had something else over here. On section 3, letter E, you end the sentence in letter E of that paragraph. It says, by anyone other than a party, and then in parentheses, it says third party beneficiary to the agreement. Can you explain what that means, please? I
No,
don't
sir,
know.
I can't. Again, that was, I think that was something that one of the legal entities included in there. I'm not sure if it's boilerplate, but I can get an answer for you on that and get back.
Okay, I would appreciate that. And on section 4, cooperation. Why, it seems that is almost a verbatim statement of what it says in number 10. And I'm wondering on the last page of this. I'm just wondering, I think it was what I had here. Number 10 says almost the same thing. So I'm wondering why we can't couple those together. If there's some reason, you can look at that and let me know later on that. But also under, let's see, that's going to be section 3 after letter I, or in letter I, when it tells about a written notice to the city and made by how you do it. Aren't we interested in having any written notice to Richland County if something happens and somebody needs to get in touch with us? Shouldn't we also add that in there? Written notice to Richland County should be made by doing whatever.
I'm not sure, since this is essentially a pass-through where we provide the funding, they build it, design and build it, and are responsible for everything, as well as detailed expenditure records to the county. But I'll ask about that too.
Okay. And under section 8, termination, if you look at the bottom of, you already alluded to it, you already stated it. In section 3, it talks about a time period at the very end of that paragraph, 10 years from the date of the project. So I'm wondering why in section 8 termination, where you use the same term that identified this, it will terminate with the end of the useful life. Seems to me we should also then add the useful life as being that 10-year period that we referenced over here. So there's no doubt.
Councilman Malinowski, I believe we have the county attorney, Ms. McLean. She's on, her hand's raised. She may be able to answer some of these questions. You're recognized, Ms. McLean.
Thank you. Emerson Malinowski, I'm trying to jump in here at some point in time. I have lots of answers. If you want to hear them, I can tell you now, or we can get together after this meeting, but
You can just send them to me. I don't want to hold the meeting up. That's fine.
okay. I think most of these actually are probably due to some changeover from Word to the PDF, because I can looking at the document that I sent and it just didn't scratch out some things, take out some things out of it. It's just an odd version that actually is in front of you, but things like notice and all, I'll hit you up with those answers.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you, Ms. McLean.
welcome.
Thank you, Ms. McLean.
And one more thing, sir, we did actually before this meeting receive the counter stamped version back from the city. So the version I have in my hand, which is not necessarily before you, has the stamp from the City of Columbia's attorney on it also.
Any other questions for Director Nehemiah on this particular action item? Okay, is there a motion?
So move, Mr. Chair.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, Madam Clerk, can we take the vote?
Sure. Malinowski,
No, until I get the answers, please.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Overture Walker,
Yes.
Mackey,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you. Now, the next action item on the agenda is item 5B. This is the modification to Innovista Phase 3, D-scope and funding approval. Director Nehemiah, if you don't mind, please, explain this particular item to the committee.
All right, thank you, Mr. Walker. What's before you on 5B, it's entitled Modification to Innovista Phase 3 D-scope and funding approval. This is tied to the City of Columbia's FY22 funding request. The first item that they're requesting is for us to provide $150,000 in Innovista transportation related projects funding to allow them to begin the NEPA review process for what is Innovista Phase 3, which we call the William Street Connector, although as the city calls it their City Columbia Riverfront Gateway Project. All that information is in your pack. So of the two actions for committee's consideration today, the first again is that request for $150,000 from the city, which would be included in transportation's FY22 budget. That would be given to the city afterwards so they could start the NEPA review. And that's really important because that is one of the items that helps facilitate or the initiation of that project and seeking outside funding. In this case, I believe the city's going after a federal build or raise grant. And it's important to act on this because I believe the submission deadline, if it's the same as last year, is in May. And if we do have the city on the line, we have Ms. Dana Higgins. If there's some specific questions, and I'm sure she can more eloquently describe some of the needs. But we could start with that action unless you'd like me to continue with the second consideration, sir.
Well, let me just stop you there for a second, Director Nehemiah. Are there any questions, Director Nehemiah, regarding the first, recommendation?
Yes, sir.
You recognize, Councilwoman.
Mr. Nehemiah, how does this differ from our original de-scoping plan? Is this something totally new?
No, ma'am. As we'll get into on the second item for consideration, when the D-scope plan was moved forward in May of last year and approved, one of the items was removal of the Phase 3 project from Innovista transportation related projects. And the reasoning for that is there was only approximately, say, $5 million that was anticipated to be remaining after completion of Phase 1 and Phase 2. As you recall, Phase 2 is ongoing, the Green Street Connector. Subsequently, that high estimate of which the money would not really make a dent in came down slightly. And with the city moving forward or trying to move forward with the grant package to submit for the RAISE grant, with a typical 2080 type of fund matching, they're looking to take, let's say, we're asking for the $4 million to help assist in securing $20 million if you're looking at the 2080 piece here. So as far as what Phase 3 looked like before, the William Street Connector, I'm not particularly sure, but I believe it was based on the city's Columbia Riverfront Gateway project that connected to the riverfront, had the street that would connect, was it Wayne and, I forget the
So the
other one.
fund,
Day of Blossom.
so the amount of funding is the same from what we initially approved for de-scoping, or is there a different amount?
Well, ma'am, with the de-scoping, we removed the phase 3 altogether, so there would be a
This is
amount
new.
of, excuse me, ma'am?
This will be new then. If we remove phase 3, now we're putting phase 3 back in.
Yes, ma'am, and this is similar to, related to what we just did with the Garner's Ferry intersection, where we looked at de-scoping, came back, Ms. Steele talked with the engineers and the other project managers and said, no, we need to go back to the original. And, that amount was below the referendum. In this
Okay.
case, it's the same thing. There's 50
So
million.
where are we taking the money? How is this changing the amount of money?
It would just remove that,
Will we
If-
be adding more money or subtracting money from the plan?
well, we'd be taking, what was it, about a $5.3 million estimated savings by removing the phase 3 plan that would have been available for other things, and really just taking that back and putting it back into the Innovista phase 3 project. So if
So
we
we're
were
adding
saving,
an additional 5 million.
yes, ma'am,
from
it'd
the
be part of the
de-scope, so this
50 million
additional 5
in the
million.
referendum.
Okay, this is 5 million from the de-scoping plan. We put in 5, we're requesting 5 million additional funds.
Yes, that would come off what was briefed as the savings by all the de-scope actions that were approved by council.
So or not, we won't save the 5 million. That's what I'm trying to find out.
That's correct, ma'am. It'd be
Okay.
used for the Innovista project.
Okay, so the 5 million will not be saved. And this, we're taking the 5 million. How is this gonna impact the other money that we plan for, the other projects?
Well, ma'am, at this point, it wouldn't really, since we haven't gone back, which will take some time, and say, brought these actions back to council of, hey, we want to, increase, rescope some of these projects, and it's going to cost us 10 million. We haven't gotten to that because we're in a lot of these projects that we could potentially rescope are a design right now.
Okay, so all that we went into de-scoping, now we re-scoping.
Yes, ma'am. I believe that was discussed last year, bringing these projects back.
No, I just wanted to make sure that I'm getting my numbers right. So that's 5 million that we re-scope. So when it comes to something I'm interested in, we'll get that. It won't be de-scoped. Thank you.
It looks like, so we are rescoping the de-scope, huh? All right, you're recognized, Councilman Livingston.
Yes. Mr. Nehemiah, we're still talking about once we put the funds back toward the Innovista phase 3, it would still be within the referendum amount for the Vista project, correct?
Yes, sir. The referendum allocated $50 million for Innovista projects. Currently, I believe the last number for phase 1 was 17.9 million. Phase 2 is under construction, had an estimate of 23.2 million, even though it's currently trending lower. So at the most, you're looking at 8 to 9 million remaining of the 50 million that could be used for this next project.
Now, and we also, as we did the de-scoping, we did talk about the possibility of having to revisit some of the projects based on need and availability of funding. Now, I think what's really important that I want my colleagues to remember, well, can't remember because you weren't here then. One of the main objectives for phase 3 was centered around economic development. The idea was to open up that part of across E.G. Street, to open up development along the river between Blossom and Gervais. Same as we did with our industrial park. And we see the benefit, significant benefit from that. Had we not done that, we wouldn't have, Anthony Brewing and Juice and so forth. So I think we need to think about the big picture. And that is what phase 3 is attempting to address. Also, too, one big main driver, as we talked about and tried to get the penny passed, was to make a significant effort to leverage additional funding. So what we're talking about is, we're talking about using funds that were originally appropriated, originally a part of the bond referendum, to try to generate some $20 million to leverage these funds for economic development. I think that is extremely significant if we can make that happen. It would be achieved with the very specific goals and intent of the penny program. To miss out on an opportunity, I think, it would be very unfortunate for Richland County to not be able to achieve or get those grant funds if they're available. So I do strongly support staff recommendation to try to obtain these fundings regarding the grant.
Thank you, Mr. Livingston.
So that's for now, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thank you. You're recognized, Councilwoman McBride. Councilwoman McBride, you're recognized. You have to unmute yourself.
Sir,
There you go.
I am not disagreeing with staff's recommendation, nor am I disagreeing with what Mr. Livingston stated. I do want to make it known that we have unincorporated Richland County as well as incorporated. And I want to make sure that as we go through the de-scoping or re-scoping process, that we take all of this under consideration. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Any additional questions for Director Niemeyer with respect to staff's first recommendation on this
Mr.
item?
Chair, Bill Malinowski.
You recognize Councilman Malinowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question for Mr. Niemeyer is, we're giving the city $150,000 from what I'm reading in our agenda package here, so that they can begin this NEPA review process for phase 3 of this particular project. And it says that the funding will facilitate the initiation of the project and is necessary for seeking a federal grant also. Giving them the $150,000, because it also says that after the end of that review process, it will categorically let us know if the project should move forward or not. So why would we approve $4 million now until we know if they can get the grant and if the project would move forward or not? I would say, why don't we approve the $150,000 when we get the results of that, and then we can come back and go for the $4 million, rather than obligate it for this in case something else comes along.
Mr. Chair, just for clarification, I thought I read it was going to be a letter of commitment for that amount, not so much giving it to them.
That's
Right,
correct, sir.
and we haven't gotten to the staff's recommendation 2 yet. And maybe we should have allowed Director Niemeyer to go through both recommendations, but I figured that since there are 2 recommendations, let him explain the first and then field questions on that one, and then allow him to explain the second and field questions with regarding the second. But go ahead, Director Niemeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Yes, what the second recommendation for this committee's consideration is for the county to provide a letter of support to the city for their submission for this Build or Rise grant. Essentially, what it is, it's showing the city's support with funding, in this case for $4,088,633 to help them in securing that outside funding for the project. So the letter of commitment shows good faith to the federal government, who would be reviewing their complete grant submission package, evaluating the finances available, and help support that particular effort for them. Now, this is very common. If we go back to our Build grant submission from years past, where we have countless letters of not only support but of commitment. In this case, like Mr. Livingston said, this is a generator. We have penny funding that can be that good faith effort to support, getting 80% more money. These letters of support, as well as as well as the finances are really critical, and ensuring that you have a solid submission for evaluation.
Thank you, Director Niemeyer. Councilwoman Teresa, you're recognized.
Thank you. Sorry, I forgot to lower my hand when I was kind of hearing that answer. And my question was just really around, was this more of a commitment with the $4 million rather than an actual expenditure before we know that it's a viable project? So I believe my question has been answered.
Thank you. Well, I have a question, Director Niemeyer. So the $150,000, is that sort of and that's for the NEPA study, is that sort of a prerequisite to the letter of commitment? In other words, you can't have one without the other. The $150,000 that that those funds would have to be allocated or paid to the city. And then subsequent to that, we would have this letter of commitment, but the letter of commitment, you don't even get to that phase or that step without the $150,000 payment to the city. Is that interpretation correct?
I believe one could happen without the other. The letter of commitment gets put into their grant submission package and helps show that the financial stability of the city, the county's penny program and support, and allow them to move forward. In order them, so down the road, should this grant get approved, there's a very long on-ramp for getting the project completely developed, which involves this environmental type assessment. And I'll, if Ms. Higgins wants to jump in and maybe elaborate a bit.
Sure. Yeah, Ms. Higgins, you're recognized, please.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you for having us here. And this project is very important to the city. And like Director Niemeyer said, the NEPA process gets us that much closer to shovel ready. It's looked on more favorably by Washington, and this Tiger turned bill. Now it's RAISE, I believe it's called, and we'll be pulling that application together in the next couple of months. We expect to hear back in the fall. I think September is when we typically hear back. This is probably our third or fourth time we're applying. So this is a very important project to the city. And having that NEPA process started will allow us to have a higher rating once we're looked at by the USDOT that review our applications. We also have this as one of our state legislative priorities as well.
And Ms. Higgins, I guess that was, and maybe I didn't ask the question, and maybe I should have asked it differently, but that's why I guess I was wondering, as far as the $150,000 commitment of payment for the NEPA review or study in conjunction with the letter of commitment, that those two things, you really can't have one without the other. Or I guess you could, but if we were going to be competitive, for these federal funds, that number one, we need to be close to shovel ready. And you said the NEPA review, certainly gets us there. But then secondly, the letter of commitment. So maybe I didn't ask the question correctly, but I was thinking you can't have one without the other. One's a prerequisite, for the other. And of course, you need both in order for the federal government to take us seriously.
Yes, sir. And to answer that question, the city was not completely aware that this project had been de-scoped. So we went for the application for the bill last year with the match money from the county. So I guess what we're asking for is for this fiscal year, we only asked for monies that we felt like we could spend because we know that we have to submit back for reimbursement. So our CIP request for 21-22 is the $150,000 for the NEPA. We won't find out if we are granted the RAISE grant until this fall. So that's why we didn't necessarily ask for the $4 million, but we just wanted to have that match letter of commitment so that we could submit that with our application that's due in the next couple of months.
And in the event that we aren't successful with this effort, well, it's not like it's $4 million that's gone down the drain. It's just a letter of commitment or a show of good faith on the part.
Yes, sir. We would love to have this project re-scoped. I believe that's the terminology y'all been used because we do find it's a very important to the city. And we will continue to look for additional funding because we know that 50 million, as Mr. Livingston had mentioned, was in the referendum. We know we can't exceed that amount, but we would like to take advantage of what is left over now that the other projects are done and leverage that funding to try to get state or federal money.
Sure. And Councilman Livingston, you've had your hand up for a while. You're recognized.
Yes, let me, Ms. Higgins said that this project is very important to the city. And let me say, as a county council member, it is my opinion that this project is very important to the county. Once that area opened up and you get economic development, the county is going to generate quite a bit of tax revenue. And fortunate for the county, to generate the revenue, we wouldn't have to worry about providing the services. So no, this is a tremendous benefit and importance to the county if it gets developed. So I just want to make sure that's clear.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Livingston. Mr. Director Nehemiah, your hand's up.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Not to belabor the point, but we're currently working with the predecessor of Tiger Grant for North Main, where the county committed its money from the penny, while the city went out and sought out and was awarded a Tiger Grant. So our commitment to North Main is capped at that referendum amount, and anything above that is covered by our Tiger Grant or by the city's Tiger Grant. So there's an example right there of where the penny had the funding help support the city's effort to widen and improve that North Main corridor. And that was a very successful effort, obviously.
Thank you, Director Nehemiah. Mr. Livingston, your hand's still up there. Okay.
I was going to say some more, but I'll save it for
no, go ahead, and the floor is yours.
I'm through for now.
Mr. Chair, Bill Malinowski.
We don't have a lot of time.
Councilman. You recognize Councilman Malinowski.
Thank you, sir. Couple questions here, and I guess maybe Ms. Higgins could provide the answers. What is the dollar amount of the grant that you're going for?
The total amount that we have requested from the build last year, and it'll be the raise this year, is 15 million. I can give you the exact amount.
Okay, so you're just going for the balance above the 4 million, is that it?
Yes, sir. Our total project is 19.987 million. We understand that there was 4,088,663 left over after the bid for Green Street Phase 2 that's underway right now. So we just subtracted that from our cost estimate and came up with the 15.898 request from the raise grant that we'll be submitting for this year.
Okay, and is there a specific amount that's required to be put down when you ask for these grants?
Typically, I believe it's a 20% match requirement, and we are trying to exceed that. I believe we do just over the 20%. I need to go back and take a look at that, but
That's fine, ballpark's fine. And then you stated initially that this is your third or fourth time applying. Is that applying for the same grant for the same project?
yes, sir. It's funny, I've learned when you go to Washington, sometimes third or fourth time is a charm. Charleston got a very large one last year, so we are expecting that this might be our year. We're hopeful. We've partnered with USC, University of South Carolina. It's a very important project for them as well because it does open that corridor on Green Street that's under construction to the river, like Mr. Livingston had mentioned.
Okay, and Director Nehemiah, if they were not to get the grant, does this 4 million go back into the penny funds for use otherwise?
Director Nehemiah, you're muted. Director Nehemiah, you're muted. There you go.
Got it. Yeah, I don't know how that happened. Yes, sir. Since this is a letter of commitment, if it's not used, the money will sit there. It will be available if this body desires to allow the city to use it to go take a fourth shot at this grant, or if there's some recommendation through working with staff here to come up for other ways to use it, which will be brought back to this body for a decision.
Okay, thank you. I'm through.
Okay. Any further questions for the Director Nehemiah or Ms. Higgins? All right, is there a motion?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move for approval for items 1 and 2.
Okay, is there a second? And to be clear with respect to your motion, Mr. Chair, Chairman Livingston, you asking for the motion with respect to item 5B, correct? Just being clear for the record.
Yes.
5B.
I
Okay,
second.
that's the motion second. All right, any discussion? Okay, well, Madam Clerk, will you please take the vote? Madam Clerk's probably muted again.
She's trying to unmute.
I'm sorry about that. So it says you can use alternate A, but sometimes that doesn't work. So I apologize.
No apologies needed, Ms. Mathis. Go ahead, you gotta take the vote.
Malinowski,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Overture Walker,
Yes.
Mackey,
Yes.
motion passes.
All right, that brings us to our next item on the agenda, which is next action item is 5C. That is the transportation improvement contract with respect to Old Garners Ferry Road. And Director Nehemiah, if you would be willing to explain staff's recommendation with respect to this action item.
Certainly. Thank you, Chairman Walker. What's before you is a Penny Transportation Project, Transportation Improvement Contract 2 to repair Old Garners Ferry Road. It's about a 1.1 mile road that connects at Garners Ferry at one end and Garners Ferry at the other. Runs behind Pineview Park. The staff is requesting council to approve the Transportation Improvement Contract 2 Old Garners Ferry Road to Palmetto Corp Conway in the amount of $471,916.45 with a 15% contingency in the amount of $70,787.46 for a total of $542,703.91.
Okay. Any questions for Director Nehemiah regarding this item?
Mr. Chair.
Sure, you recognize Mr. Malinowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Nehemiah, was this a referendum item, this TIP, Transportation Improvement Contract?
Yes, sir. This falls under the roadways program where we do both dirt roads and do resurfacing.
Okay, yes is fine. And over on, under additional comments for consideration, your number 1, it says staff is working to bring the department into uniformity with the rest of the county. And you're talking about it falls in line with the way Public Works handles their projects. Could you please explain that?
This is about the 15%, sir.
I don't know. Maybe that's what it's for.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yes, sir. Particularly a project like this, it's not as straightforward with a lot of unknowns. If you've ever driven down Old Garners Ferry Road, it's called a mixed medium. Is some asphalt, it's got some concrete. It's got a lot of.
Let me interrupt you, Director Nehemiah. It's not that. I was just wondering what you meant by you're working to bring the department into uniformity with the rest of the county.
Okay.
I don't need all the details about that project.
I'm sorry.
In other words,
We're using charge.
what does the rest of the county do that you're not doing and you're trying to bring them into uniformity?
I guess the point was how Public Works handles their projects, and that's what we're going for with this one.
What aren't you doing that they're doing? That's what I'm asking.
Ms. Steele?
Yeah, we're going to start trying to do a 15% contingency on our projects. That's standard for Public Works. That's standard for these construction type projects.
Okay, so that's the answer. That's relating strictly to the contingency.
That's part of the
what I
answer.
thought,
That's
too.
right. That's good.
Threw me
Thank
for a loop there.
Thank you. Okay.
All right, you recognize Mr. Livingston.
I just removed my hand. I'm good. My
All right,
question answered.
Councilwoman Mackey, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Mayor, I don't know if you know this answer or if someone from procurement is on, but I noticed, there's a large difference, over $150,000 difference between Palmetto Corp's bid and the other two. And so did we really investigate their bid to make sure that they can adequately do the job and that they're not underbidding. And we're in a situation later where they maybe left out some of the key things that the other two bidders included.
Yes, ma'am, that's always a valid concern, but, you know, the quantities bid are reviewed by the technical team. And, you know, based on past experience, as well as what they looked like when they bid, we're very confident in Palmetto Corp Conway. It is a remarkable difference. But we've also seen other bids similar where the contractor has performed excellently.
And Ms. Steele, you're recognized.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, they all bid on the same quantities, and they are, whatever bid they put in for each line item, they're held to that dollar amount. So unless we, the county, left out a quantity or a line item altogether, there's really nothing that they can come back and try to sneak in on us.
Okay. And I noticed in the report as well that.
Yeah, our procurement person is hands up too.
Okay, sure. All right. Well,
Who know more about this than all of us.
No. We'll go ahead and you're recognized.
Thank you. It's Jennifer Ladishkin, Procurement Manager. I was just going to piggyback off of what Michael said. It seems like all through COVID, we have experienced bids that are indicative of this very one, where they're kind of all over the board. We had one recently that went anywhere from $700,000 to $2 million. So I think it has to do with the fluctuations in material charges and just what people are willing to bid on in order to get projects. Palmetto Corp's done a lot of work for the county, and so we're confident that they've provided us a good bid.
So this wasn't a matter of just trying to get the lowest bidder, but certainly reconciling, I guess, the amount of the bid with the quality of the work, and the county is certainly familiar with Palmetto Corp's work. That's what it sounds like.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any additional questions for Director Nehemiah? All right. Is there a motion?
Move approval, Mr. Chair.
All right. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? All right. Madam Clerk, will you take the vote?
Certainly. Malinowski,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Overture Walker,
Yes.
Mackey,
Yes.
motion passes.
Okay. Well, everyone, that's all the items. we
Motion to
have.
adjourn.
So is there a motion? There is. There's a second?
Second.
All right, it's not too resounding. Okay. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Hey,
you.
Mr. Walker,
Thank you,
well,
Mr. Chair.
now that we're adjourned, Mr. Walker, I got a comment for you.
Sure.
And that is, could you or somebody please check in the future, this is the second month in a row that the time has been incorrect on the actual agenda paper.
Yes, I will look. In fact, Councilman, I will look into that because it put me in a difficult spot today with court. I actually told the court that I couldn't get there at 3 o'clock because I had.
This is what I usually go with.
And then when I checked, I got my email. It was 4 o'clock. I said, "Oh well, I can be there."
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
Yeah.
I know, but we had moved the meetings to 4 just so that way I could be here for these meetings. But in any
That's
event,
fine.
I'll certainly get with Ms.
That's
Matthews.
fine, just so I know. Thank you.
We left that in there for you, Mr. Malinowski, just to find it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
okay. I appreciate that, Michael.
Well, but it won't happen again.
He has enough to find.
Also, thanks to my colleagues.